Alrighty guys, Mr.W here again. We are ready for our next online social group, and when choosing a topic for this, I thought what better topic than talking about dealing with change. So right now we are going through this coronavirus COVID-19 thing, and the entire world as we know it has changed over this last month. And it has made things very interesting, let's say that. So we're going to talk about dealing with change and what that looks like. So the first thing I'm going to ask though is what does change mean? So what does it mean for something to change? Well, change is just something anytime something becomes different. So change happens all the time. When you're asleep and you wake up, you changed. When you're at school and you're in math class and then it's time for recess, it changed. You're no longer getting instruction, you're outside playing and having a good time. Sometimes we have substitute teachers at school and that causes change. Sometimes it's as simple as just we went from the lesson to the activity in class and there's change there. Our body changes, we get taller, our hair grows longer, things like that. Change is happening all the time. But sometimes change is more difficult and sometimes change is easier. So I want you to think about when is a time that you experienced change? So what was something that changed for you? What about in the world? If you could change anything in the world, what would you change? Anything at all, what would you change? So like I said before, some change can be easy and something we like. So maybe we get something new, a new toy, a new game. That's change that we like. But sometimes change can be difficult. Maybe you move. Maybe you have a substitute teacher who's not very nice. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the power goes out at home and you can no longer play your video games. These are all changes that you may not like. So how do you feel when things change? So when things are changing around you, how do you feel? So let's think about what's going on right now. With this whole coronavirus, we are no longer at school, which is why we're having online school. And that's a huge change. I mean, what better example of change than how you went to school every single day, had work, sat at school for 8 hours a day, and now you're at home all day trying to learn what you were supposed to learn at school through silly teachers who think they know how to make YouTube videos and Google Classrooms. So things have changed a lot. So maybe that's a positive change for you because you're at home more. Maybe you have more time to play video games, you're spending more time with your family. Maybe that's a positive change for you. But maybe it's also a negative change for you. Maybe it's a lot harder to learn. Maybe your teacher isn't doing a very good job making these videos. Maybe the internet isn't working right and you can't get on Google Classroom and you don't get to see your friends as often as you used to. Maybe this change isn't good. So sometimes change is positive and sometimes change is negative. So sometimes change is positive, like when we go on summer vacation. So when it's summer break and school's over for summer, that's a positive change and we have a lot of fun with that. Maybe change is good because you've learned something new. You found something you liked that you didn't know before, and the change is good. But sometimes change can be difficult. When you don't expect something and things change, and things go from easy to difficult. Sometimes change is not a good thing, and it's hard to deal with. So maybe, just like with this whole no going to school and being stuck in your house thing, maybe that change is really difficult for you. So let's think about some of these difficult changes. So maybe your teacher gives you a surprise test. That would not be a change I would enjoy. So you don't know this test is coming. There's a change. It's difficult. Sometimes we have change. Maybe you break a bone. If you've ever broken a bone, you can probably relate to this. That change can be really, really hard. Maybe one of your best friends moves away. That would be a very difficult change. This is a person you see all the time. You enjoy playing with them. They're a good friend. And then they move away. Sometimes change can affect us negatively, but sometimes it can also be positive. So we're mostly talking about that difficult change. Because when change is positive, it's usually a lot easier to deal with. And we're going to talk about dealing with that negative change, that hard to deal with change. So what are some of those feelings you get on the inside when you have to deal with change? So I want you to think about that. How does it make you feel on the inside when you have to deal with that difficult change? So I'm going to think about myself here. So with going to online teaching, this is a difficult change. I'm no longer getting to see the kids that I used to see every single day. I'm trying to find things to do with all my time at home when I'm not allowed to leave the house. And so how does that make me feel? Well, first of all, it actually makes me feel a little worried. I'm worried about how my students are doing. I'm worried about, am I forgetting to do something because there's not people to talk to around me that are doing the same thing as me. So it's harder to keep track of what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm worried that I'm not getting it done. Maybe I'm feeling a little overwhelmed because now instead of getting to teach at school, I have to come up with a way to teach you through YouTube videos and hope that that content makes sense, and it worries me. It causes some stress. There's a loss of control. At school, I feel like I have a lot more control of what's going on. At home, I really don't. I have to hope that you guys are trying your best and you guys are learning from what I'm teaching, but it's a lot harder to know. And so that makes me feel worried. It makes me feel stressed. And it makes me feel a little overwhelmed. It's a very different feeling than when I get to go to school. I get to interact with the same students every day. We get to build those relationships and have a good time, and we get to work through the tough times together. So it's a very different change for me. So we're going to think about a word called coping. So what do you think the word coping might mean? Have you ever heard the word coping before? Well, coping just means it's a way of dealing with stressful events. So it's a way to just deal with when things are hard. It is what we do when things are stressful or difficult. So what can you do to cope when change is happening? Well, we can use some relaxation techniques that we've maybe talked about at school, but if you don't know any, we can talk about those now. So 3 steps to coping. These are 3 things I want you to think about anytime there's very difficult change. So if something is changing around you and you're having a hard time, the first thing I want you to do is ask, how does this change affect me? Is it a positive change or a negative change? I then want you to ask yourself, what can I do about this situation? Is this in my control? Is it out of my control? Is there something I can do to make it better? How can I help myself? And so then you need to take control and use the best coping strategy you can. So this is where we're going to use one of those relaxation techniques. And maybe you need an adult's help. If you need an adult's help, that's okay. We're still learning these strategies. We're still students. We're still kids. You haven't had a whole lifetime of dealing with how to cope. You haven't had as much experience, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you when these things get hard. And so we're going to help you pick a strategy if you can't figure out one that's helping you. But if you know when you're angry, something helps you, try using those same strategies whenever you're feeling those big feelings about change. Try and get yourself to a place where you can get calm and think about, can I control this and how can I make my situation better? So some good ways to deal with change is using a relaxation strategy. You can ask for a break and ask for someone's help. These are good ways to deal with change. Some not so great choices that we can make when we're trying to deal with change. Throwing a temper tantrum. We can lay on the floor and kick and scream and cry, but that's not going to help us. So that's not a great choice to help us deal with change. We could become upset. We could become very angry. Maybe we throw something. Maybe we break something. Maybe we hit something. It might make us feel better But in life, we can't just throw, break, and hit things every time something changes and we don't like it. So we need to come up with other ways to deal with it. And sometimes doing nothing is not the right choice. Because sometimes when we do nothing, we sit there and we keep worrying. And our feelings keep getting bigger, and they keep getting bigger, and they keep getting bigger, and next thing you know, it blows up into something even more for us. We get mad at somebody for no reason because we're stressed out about something else. So sometimes we need to figure out how can we deal with this in the moment so that it doesn't have those consequences we talked about before. So what are some ways that you have coped with change in the past? So what is something you have done that has helped you when things change in the past? You can leave your answer in the comments below. You can talk about it with your group, write it on a piece of paper, or if you're in my Google Classroom, it'll be written on the questions. I want to know what is a way that you've dealt with change. Maybe you're someone that's really struggled with change. Tell me a way that you've tried that didn't help very much. That's okay too. What is a way that you have tried to deal with change using your own strategy? Whether it was a good strategy or not, what is something you've tried? So I'm going to ask you to think back to earlier in the video, and I want to see your thoughts on this. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, how can change be a good thing? So we talked about change is not always a bad thing. So once again, in those same ways we talked about before, I want you to come up with, how can change be a good thing? Now I want to think about, how can change be hard? So what kind of change is hard for you to deal with? So I want you to think about, how can change be hard for you? And then the last question I want you to think about, what is a strategy that you want to try next time things get hard because they changed? What is a strategy that you want to try next time things are difficult? All right, so that's going to wrap up our social group here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully we got all those questions answered. Hopefully we got to think about and have good discussion. If you are in my Google Classroom, make sure you submit those answers to me. If you are doing it on paper or with your parents or with your teacher, make sure you did your best work. And if you are not a part of my classroom, thank you so much for coming and joining us for this content. And hopefully you guys had a good experience, and I will see you next time.